Hello chess lovers, Suren here, and in this video I want to share with you an interesting and a complicated game which was played in round 10 at the 2019 World Junior Championship, with the white pieces playing Indian chess grandmaster Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa and his opponent is Russian international master Sergey Drygalov. But before starting our game, make sure that you are subscribed in order not to miss my future uploads. As I've already mentioned, in this game Praggnanandhaa was playing with the white pieces and he opened up with e4. Drygalov responded with Sicilian defense c5, knight f3 d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3 and a6. Black goes for Najdorf variation, against which white is choosing the main line bishop g5, e6, queen f3. Well, I have to tell you that in here the main move is considered to be f4, but in our game we have queen f3. White is bringing his queen on the king side, is not losing a tempo on f4 and is preparing an immediate castling queen side. Bishop e7, here white castled queen side, knight d7, bishop d3. Well, I have to tell you that usually in here white is putting his bishop on e2, but in our game we have bishop d3, knight e5, queen h3, h6, bishop e2. We first saw bishop d3 and then bishop e2. Not sure what Praggnanandhaa had in mind, but I guess this was a well-prepared line by him. Bishop d7, bishop e3, rook c8, f4, and instead of moving away his knight, black went for a very interesting exchange sacrifice. Rook takes c3. Typical exchange sacrifices are very popular in Sicilian defense, and with this move black is weakening white's queen side. Now if b takes c3, then black can simply play knight g6 and then can proceed with the attack, but in our game after rook takes c3, Praggnanandhaa chose to win the knight on e5. In return black played knight takes e4 and e takes d6. Well, accepting the rook sacrifice can give black a nice counterplay. After queen a5, black is getting nice attacking chances. That's why in our game we have e takes d6. But anyways, queen a5 was played, and already you have to be very careful because winning this bishop can be catastrophic for white because of this queen takes h2 with a direct mating threat. And if you move like knight b3, then simply queen takes b3. That's why after queen a5, Praggnanandhaa played king b1. Protected the pawn on a2 and knight f2. Relying on this pin, black is forking white's heavy artillery. Queen g3 and knight takes h1. So far so good, but it turns out that by going for knight takes h1, black is winning the wrong rook. Instead, it was better to win the rook on d1. Now if rook takes d1, then rook takes e3, and then bishop takes d6. The players have equal chances, but in our game we have knight takes h1, and later the knight on h1 will fall victim. Here rook takes h1 can be met with rook takes e3. That's why Praggnanandhaa played queen e1, bishop g5, and knight b3. Well, this is a strong move, but it's not as strong as bishop g1. With this move, white is still keeping his bishop alive, is controlling this f2 square, not allowing black knight to escape, and is threatening queen takes c3. Typical moves like rook c5 won't pass because of this b4 move. Let's go back, but in our game after bishop g5 we have knight b3. Here we have rook takes b3. Black is going for a queen sacrifice, which turns out to be the only move which is allowing black to prolong his resistance, and rook takes e3. But the thing is that the knight on h1 is vulnerable, and relying on that fact, white is managing to gain advantage. Queen e1, bishop f4. Well, instead of playing bishop f4, it was better to castle king side. Now if I move like queen f1, then e5, if bishop c4, then bishop g4. All the time black is managing to create problems for white. If rook e1, then black can go for the exchange of rooks, and then rook d8, indirectly protecting this knight on h1 because queen takes h1 can be met with rook takes d6. And actually after rook d8, if we move like queen takes e5, then bishop f6, and black is still holding, the white has an advantage. But in our game, after queen e1, we have bishop f4, which is even worse, and after this move, actually, Praggnanandhaa managed to beat his opponent pretty quickly. Queen f1, he's first unpinning the bishop in order to move it away and then win the knight on h1. Bishop takes h2, and queen takes h1. White is offering the bishop on e2, but in return will win black's dark squared bishop. Bishop f4, g3, white is opening up the queen's diagonal, bishop c6, and d7 check, king d8, queen f1, bishop e5, and a beautiful move by Praggnanandhaa, bishop takes a6. Now if takes a6, then queen takes a6 is coming, and white is winning. That's why black didn't accept the bishop sacrifice, instead won the pawn on g3, but now comes queen g1. Bishop f4 and queen takes g7. White's position is totally winning, and victory is just a matter of moves. We have some more maneuvers by white queen, and finally white queen is penetrating the 7th rank, this time from the queen side. Bishop f3, and after queen a8 check, finally we have a resignation. If king c7, then simply queen takes h8. Now if you capture on h8, then white queen will appear on the board, and then white will announce a checkmate, or after queen takes h8, if bishop takes d1, then anyways white can go for a pawn promotion, and again white is winning. That's why after queen takes a8 check, we have a resignation. This was actually an interesting and complicated game, full of tactical nuances, and all the time the positions were requiring huge deal of calculations. It was the young rising star from India who managed to find the right path and win the game. In the end, let's also solve a chess puzzle where the task is to find mate in 3. It's white to move, and I will wait for your answer in the comment section. The task is actually very easy, and I'm sure that you will find the solution pretty quickly. Thanks for watching. In the end, here are more suggestions for you. Feel free to check them out as well. I will see you in my next video. Take care.